it's supposed to distribute aid is what it is. It's not public diplomacy per se, but
it's promoting, transgender comic books in South America. And
Tom, you got to spend less time on Twitter.
Welcome to RealClearPolitics on Sirius XM for Monday, February 3rd. I'm Andrew Walworth, and I'm joined by RCP President and co-founder Tom Bevan and Washington Bureau Chief Carl Cannon. Well, gentlemen, happy Monday. Let's start with Trump's much anticipated tariffs, which have really set off a firestorm of reaction in Washington. But Tom, we had two articles on the front page today on public opinion towards tariffs. A poll from I&I Tips shows that about half of all Americans favor new tariffs on Canada, Mexico, and China. And this was interesting to me. This was from Democratic pollster Stan Greenberg, who wrote, the white working class men and women, who are 45% of the electorate, give it a net 39, 68 to 29%, and net 22 warm response, respectively. White union households, Gen Z, millennials, and Hispanics are all marginally positive. So there does seem to be this split between elite opinion on the one hand and the general public opinion, at least according to these polls, on the other. What explains the difference?
Well, and, Trump has always said that, he got after the Wall Street Journal, said they're always wrong. They've always been wrong on tariffs. They wrote an editorial this morning blasting him for this needless trade war that's going on, and all of the opinion pieces that are out there and the analysis this is going to make things cost more, right? Trump's he's going to do the opposite of bringing down inflation. He's needlessly going to make things cost more. Well, we'll see about that. I mean, again, Trump has already, there was a story that already came out that he and Mexico have reached an arrangement to delay the tariffs, right? And there was a couple of folks in Canada who said, listen, this is a negotiating tool for him. Like, we'll see exactly how much this actually costs and goes into effect, how long it lasts, and what Trump is able to get out of this. But I don't know that we're going to have 25% tariffs on all of these goods from our largest trading partners for the foreseeable future. I think this was his opening gambit to sort of reset relations with these countries vis-a-vis trade. And he's been very consistent on this going back, 30 years longer. And this is something that he believes in deeply. And again, he believes that everybody, all of the elite opinion makers that you mentioned, are flat dead wrong about tariffs. And so he was clear about that on the campaign trail, and there's support for it. So we'll see if it works or not.
Well, Carl, he did run on tariffs. Tom's right about that. He called it the most beautiful word in the English language, as I recall. But I'm still. What do you think explains this sort of split in public opinion? It's just two. It's an article and a poll. Well, there are two polls really, but it does sort of show a very different view of these than you get if you read Washington Post, Wall Street Journal. Any of my economics professors, I would add, would be on that side. So what do you think?
Andy, I'm thinking that elites have been wrong by a lot of things, and people like, us educated people who read these newspapers you described, we tend to remember. I don't know how many of the people answering this poll can tell you what Smoot-Hawley was. I don't know how many of the people answering that poll know that in 1930, President Hoover thought to address the Great Depression by having tariffs, going along with Congress, actually, what he did. It was bipartisan then. And that, it made sure that the Great Depression was a worldwide depression. I mean, it was just a disastrous policy. But that's a long time ago, 1930. And, people also, things change. But, the experts also said that you raise the minimum wage, that would cost jobs and be inflationary. Turned out pretty marginal effect. So a lot of what elites have told people, and I want to get into what the government told people during the pandemic, has proven to be wrong. So I think they're skeptical. That's the first thing. The second thing I'd say is that I don't know how these questions, when you put China in that question, your number's going to go up. If you asked a question, and look, this wouldn't be great social science, but I'm making a point here. if you said, should we have a 25% tariff on Canada, which is in violation of both the spirit and the letter of a current treaty we have with Canada, even though Canada has done nothing wrong and violated no trade agreements, would you favor that? The numbers might be different.
Well, Tom, the thing is that
the numbers would be different.
Yeah, he, like I say, he ran on tariffs, but when he talked about Mexico, he's talking about getting them to change policies outside of trade, like more troops on the border, crack down on fentanyl, stuff like that. Canada, it's more that he feels they are bad trading partners. So the question I still have, and you sort of alluded to it, is whether he sees tariffs as another tool for diplomacy, or whether he really wants to roll back globalization. That seems to be like the two schools of thought. And I'm beginning to think that it's the latter. I think he actually does want to roll back globalization.
I was going to say, I think it's both, actually. I think he definitely uses tariffs as a tool, an economic tool, to get the attention of countries. And, Canada, it's a perfect example. My father, who likes Canadian whiskey, is going to be not so fond of Trump if prices go up by 25, 30%. Yeah, I mean, look, Canada is our largest trading partner, and one of our largest.
They're about even with Mexico and
I was going to say one of our largest trading partners, and to Carl's point, they haven't done anything, certainly not on the same level. I mean, when you think about people when Trump says, people have been ripping us off, I'm not sure Canada necessarily falls into that category. Certainly not in the same way that China does. But again, that doesn't mean that, again, Trump is trying to, I think, reset relations with a whole host of countries, but in our own hemisphere, but also abroad. And so this is his preferred method. But I definitely agree with you, Andy. I think he wants to roll back globalization. He wants, part of the America First movement is, using America's economic might to bring manufacturing home, to decouple from some of these other countries. And that's why it's been very, very popular, particularly after the 40 years of unfettered free trade that Republicans, by the way, had pushed more so than Democrats, saying, and meanwhile, we've lost, all these manufacturing jobs overseas. I mean, it's completely changed the complexion of our country economically and our politics.
Well, but, Carl, I don't want to be too reductionist about this, but can it really be both? Can you roll back globalization and make more goods and services here in America? Or can you use it as a tool? And other presidents, as well as anyone, that Ronald Reagan used tariffs as a tool. It is a tool that presidents have used in the past. But the end game is very different when it comes to trade negotiations. It seems to me what he's saying is not what Democrats and sort of the Ross Perot sort of position was, which was, we want fair trade. They always said, we want fair trade, not free trade. What he's saying now is we want less trade, period. And
I think you're onto something, Andy. I think you're onto something. This is, he wants less immigration. He wants less trade. He wants fewer, entangling foreign alliances, to use the old phrase. This guy is into like Fortress America. Right. Is it realistic in the modern world? I think no, but there is a coherent philosophy here at play. Again, it's not my philosophy, but the tell to me was when he said, somebody pointed out to him, maybe he listens to our show. I mentioned this last week. Well, if you take away just the oil and gas that Alberta sends us, one province in Canada, we don't really have much of a trade imbalance with that country. And Trump responded to this, well, we don't need their oil and gas. It's like, it's a wall. You've got the oceans, right. But now we want a wall north and south. I guess we can keep Alaska and Hawaii. I hesitate to ask Trump about that. Maybe he wants to sell Alaska back.
Tom, Carl, you weren't here last week, but Tom had us taking over Cuba last week with you were there.
Well, I'd rather have Cuba than Greenland, but maybe we can have them both. I don't know.
But Tom, do you see my point? My point is that if the end game is to really shut down trade. That means you're negotiating towards a very different America than the America that we've had for the last 40 years, as you pointed out. And I'm just wondering whether people within Trump world, especially, sort of really see it that way, or whether it's, as sort of seems today, like it's okay, he's going to threaten, he's going to bluster, and this is classic, Trump deal that he is going to. It's the art of the deal. He's going to, not even tell you what his position is until you cave. And he seems to, have some luck with that. But again, is that the point? Is the point of this just to get Mexico to put some troops on the border, or is it really to say, Mexico, we're going to start making these cars here, so find new trading partners?
I mean, again, I don't think those are mutually exclusive things. I mean, I think, my wife and I watched 60 Minutes last night, and they profiled the Belvidere manufacturing plant, which is just up the street in Illinois, right on the border with Wisconsin. We used to drive by it, 3 times a month when we go to visit our parents in Wisconsin. And they used to make Jeeps there. And, the entire town was built around that plant. And they moved those jobs to Mexico. And they were talking about what a hardship that was. Now, does Trump want those jobs? Does he want Mexico to put troops on the border? Yes. Does he want those jobs that went to Mexico to come back to Belvedere? Yes. I mean, he wants both. And I think, so to me, those things aren't mutually exclusive. I mean, he wants to undo the damage that unfettered free trade. And again, in his mind, it is, he is trying to restore us to fair trade. I don't think he's anti-trade so much as he is anti, in his mind, America getting ripped off by the world, because we're, signing all these agreements. Everybody's taking advantage of us. And we, as the largest economic power on the globe, just sort of let it happen. And so he's trying to, gather back that economic might and have it work for America and Americans again. And again, that to me is that's one of the fundamental appeals of Donald Trump's politics, particularly, across the, I was going to say heartland of America, but even wider than that, just with working class folks all across the country.
Well, Andy, I'll add one quick thing to that. When NAFTA was negotiated in the 90s and ratified, Ross Perot warned that it would lead to jobs leaving the United States. He wasn't wrong about that. The theory then was those jobs that go to Mexico, that's better for the United States economy, especially in the Southwest, than if they go to Asia. It was sort of, to your point, globalization was the given. And this was considered the best situation then. Trump's harking back to Perot. He's saying globalization is not a given, and that those cars should be manufactured in the United States. That is his vision. Is it realistic? But, in hindsight, NAFTA made it too easy for American companies to move across the border. There was no penalty, there was no tax. It was just too easy. And it's a rational economic decision, but they've responded to it. So when these workers in this poll that you started this segment with, that's what they're thinking. They're thinking, yeah, we can build. Why should Jeeps be built in Sonora, state of Sonora? They can be built like they used to be in the Midwest.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to leave you guys with one quote from that Stan Greenberg article, which again, it's on the front page of RealClearPolitics today. People should check it out. But he says, I would not assume Trump will be hurt by announcing the 25% tariffs on Canada and Mexico, unless, of course, it produces a trade war that raises the cost of living. That's a pretty big if, but that's where Greenberg came down. When we come back, we'll talk about the results of Marco Rubio's first overseas trip to Panama and what it may mean for the future of his time at the State Department. I'm Andrew Walworth. I'm here with Carl Cannon and Tom Bevan. Don't go away. Welcome back to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM. I'm Andrew Walworth, and I'm here with Carl Cannon and Tom Bevan. And Carl, Secretary of State Marco Rubio visited with Panama's president over the weekend, and Panama announced that it was not renewing this deal with China to help run the Panama Canal. Pretty quick turnaround. Another victory for Trump's strong-arm diplomacy. Do you see it that way?
That was fast work for Marco Rubio, wasn't it? Yeah. So this is an example of the media and Trump. So Trump announces something. He says, Panama is screwing us. We built the Panama Canal, we gave it to them, and they're charging us too much money, and they've given it over to the Chinese. The media response is, the first day, we have no idea what he's talking about. The second day, they say, China has nothing to do with the Panama Canal. None of this is happening. We're being treated fairly. The day three, well, okay, there's something there. There's some contracts, but Trump's still full of shit. And then the fourth day is, oh, by the way, what Trump said was right, and he's fixed it. But we still hate him.
Carl's a pretty successful first trip.
Yeah, I think so. Tom?
Yeah, look, I mean, so Rubio went down there and well, he didn't get the Panama Canal back yet, but it's a good first start, right? To Carl's point, this idea that China had been, through their Belt and Road Initiative, had been making investments and exerting influence all over the globe, including in our own hemisphere.
You can't, Tom, you can't go anywhere. I was playing golf in Jamaica, in Montego Bay, and on this one hole, you're overlooking this huge convention center that's empty. There's no purpose for it there. And the caddy says, oh yeah, the Chinese built that. It's just, they're everywhere.
Yeah. So they obviously made this investment in Panama, which is a critical piece from a national security standpoint, let alone an economic standpoint, of our ability to traverse the canal. And to Trump's point, well, we're getting ripped off and they're charging us too much. I mean, in addition to the Chinese being in control of this critical piece of infrastructure. So Rubio heads down there, and I mean, it was within hours. I mean, it was remarkable.
Within 10 hours
yeah,
he was still in the air, and they'd announced, I think.
Yeah, I mean, remember when Trump said he was going to be winning? It reminded me of Charlie Sheen. You remember Charlie Sheen when he's so much winning, the tiger blood and all that. It's just like, oh my God, that happened fast. So yeah, obviously, a good first trip for Marco Rubio, good first stop for him down on his first trip and getting stuff done. I mean, again,
hey, can I ask you guys something?
But
can I
obviously a big win for Trump immediately.
I want to ask you guys something about Marco Rubio. So you guys, we've had him on the show. We know him, but is he like the good cop to Trump's bad cop? He goes down there, he speaks the language. He's just kind of a sweet guy, nice smile. There's this implied thing that, don't make Trump come down here. Don't like your dad. You say, don't make me pull this car over, boys.
Yeah. I wouldn't be surprised. I bet he's a pretty deft. Well, I mean, you can just judge on the way he's negotiated with Trump. I mean, he's sort of, gone from being, what did they call him, a little Marco, to being Secretary of State. That's pretty deft diplomacy right there. So yeah, I would assume he's a pretty good when you get in the room with him, because
he did do a little press conference after this was announced, and I watched a little bit of it. And, obviously he addresses them in Spanish, and it is interesting to watch him speak that language fluently. And he was very deft and very flattering toward, our friends and allies in Panama, and really talked up the relationship and the agreement that they had about repatriating some folks and that
he was diplomatic, in other words.
Yeah,
he was very diplomatic.
Hey, Tom,
I think he's going to do very well, particularly in Central and South America.
Tom, this is February of 2025. In March of 2016, Marco Rubio and Donald Trump were insulting each other over the size of each man's penis.
Yes, I remember that.
They used the word hands, but everybody understood it to be a euphemism. Did you think then that 8 years later, Secretary of State Marco Rubio would be going there, laying the first step with Panama to getting the Panama Canal back, United States control?
We should do, Carl, a piece that outlines all the folks that have run into Trump and what happened to him, because some of them obviously, got ruined. I mean, Jeb Bush, what's he doing now?
Well, how about his lawyer? He got
Chris
went to prison. His own lawyer got disbarred, and
I'm talking about his political opponents.
Okay.
Some have managed to survive and even thrive, and some have, like a Ted Cruz, still in the Senate, still doing stuff, but
He weathered it. He's sort of
he weathered it, but he didn't really advance, certainly not in the way that, Rubio was able to.
Yeah. Well, talking about Rubio just a little bit more here, as a diplomat, he did talk about Greenland as well, and he said that Greenland is serious, and the Greenlanders passed a law, I guess, or it's a resolution, I guess, to outlaw outside and anonymous donations. They've got an election coming
why?
up in April.
Yeah.
I know exactly why, and
Yeah.
they know exactly why. But apparently, Greenland's taking this pretty seriously, Carl.
Well, but they didn't outlaw direct payments to people. So you could bribe every person in Greenland. There's only 55,000 of them. Trump could do it out of his own bank account. I guess he has to claw back some of his money that New York is trying to steal from him. But you could buy New Zealand. You could buy, excuse me, Greenland. You could buy Greenland.
We can't buy New Zealand yet.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Tom,
I don't know.
we're going from Cuba to New Zealand.
I don't know how that came out. So
all the islands.
Well, no, that's it. Listen, I never am making fun of Biden for calling Zelensky Putin again, because I confuse New Zealand with Greenland.
But Tom, there's and on the Panama Canal, the Republicans have passed or brought forth a law that proposed it in the House to buy the Panama Canal. They've put that in motion. So this is sort of Teddy Roosevelt on steroids.
A little bit. And it's going to be interesting to see how this works out. So we have when our kids were really young, and we have a lot of kids, so we had an au pairs for a few years. And one of our au pairs was from one of our favorite au pairs is from Denmark, and we still keep in touch with her. And my wife texts with her, and the Danes are not happy about Greenland. I mean, it's constant, Donald Trump's election is the worst thing ever, and he's going to take over Greenland. And there was a poll that came out the other day. I sent it to my wife, and she'd forwarded it on to our au pair. Like 75% of Danes hate Trump and think Greenland is is theirs. And
yeah, but Tom, none of them have ever been to Greenland. It's like,
I know. I'm
the
just
Serbs
saying.
went to war over Kosovo. Not one Serb in 100 ever been to Kosovo.
It's just it's fascinating the way that the world sort of, and this was true when there was Trump 1, but it's even more so now with Trump 2. Like, there was the world that existed before Trump took office the second time, how we thought about our foreign relations and territorial conquest and all these different things, and now we're in sort of the post Trump 2.0 world where these things aren't that crazy. I mean, maybe by the time he leaves office in 3 years, we will have the Panama Canal back, or we will own Greenland, or we will own New Zealand.
Canada.
Who knows? I mean,
right. Yes.
Thank you, Tom. Took me off the hook.
Right. Okay. Well, anyways, we're going to take a quick break, and we're going to be back in a second. I'm Andrew Walworth. I'm here with Carl Cannon and Tom Bevan. You're listening to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM. Don't go away. Welcome back to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM. I'm Andrew Walworth. I'm here with Carl and Tom. And so Carl, tech billionaire Elon Musk said on Monday that President Trump had agreed to shut down USAID. That's the U.S. Agency for International Development. He said, "We spent the weekend feeding USAID into the wood chipper. Could have gone to some great parties, but did that instead." So what do you make of shutting down AID?
Well, if you're going to be Fortress America, I guess then you stop giving money to other countries. But this is starting to get into areas where there's statutory authority. This is an agency created. It's under the auspices of the State Department, created by Congress, I believe, when John F. Kennedy was president. It's supposed to do goodwill in the good works in the world, extend America's brand, help countries.
Well, it's supposed to distribute aid, is what it is. It's not public diplomacy per se. But
it's promoting, transgender comic books in South America and drag shows. All.
Tom, you got to spend less time on Twitter.
On Elon Musk's Twitter feed. Is that?
Yeah.
It's X, by the way. Come on. Let's get with the program.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know that you can just take a letter and have it be your letter. your company. I'm not cool with that. But then I still call the Gulf of America the Gulf of Mexico. I'm old school.
You're old school.
But the countries that need it, countries need help. The rationale for it comes out of the Marshall Plan, when the idea was, and nobody I know, no serious scholar I know contests this, we saved Western Europe from communism, from going communist. These countries were just devastated, obliterated. America was not just the arsenal of democracy, it was also the breadbasket of democracy. And we fed people who needed feeding. That's the rationale behind it. Over the years, it has become a much bigger program than we ever envisioned. You have governments and societies that depend on the money. There's a welfare state aspect to it. Elon Musk and the new crew in the Trump administration thinks they're not pro-America enough in that agency, a hotbed of Marxism or whatever. I take a lot of that with a grain of salt. But look, after 4 or 5 decades, it's grown probably out of proportion to what it was originally envisioned. And it may be time to look at every single program. But just pulling the plug on it seems extreme.
Well, Tom, I guess the idea is to save money, but it's also to move it under the State Department. There's sort of two things going on at once here. It seems is to cut the funding that we send overseas, but also to get whatever funding we send overseas under better control by Marco Rubio, I suppose.
Is that something wrong with that? Is that
Tom's a bit new evangelist for Marco Rubio. He likes it.
Yeah.
No. I mean, look, Carl may be right in terms of, is it a little hasty to maybe shut the whole thing down? Maybe. But on the other hand, I bet if you polled people on this, it would be a winner with the public.
Tyranny of the majority.
Yeah.
Listen.
Is that really the right way to look at this, though, Tom?
Donald Trump was elected to part of the reason. I mean, he was elected for a lot of reasons, but one of the things he ran on was this idea that he was going to slash the federal bureaucracy, and he put Elon Musk in charge of that. And look, when you put Elon in charge of something, he's going to get shit done, and he's clearly off to a start. And there was these stories about he had gotten access to these the Treasury payment systems, and as if this was a horrible thing that no one but lifelong unelected bureaucrats could have access to this system and see this kind of stuff. And oh my gosh, Elon's going to shut off your Social Security payments. I mean, it's all just way overblown.
Well, wait, Tom, to that point of yours, though, there were some top officials at USAID sort of put up a wall. They wouldn't let the Trump administration see where all this money was going in their documents. They said it was a security clearance thing. And I think that wasn't the right move. But look, if you're going to what Trump ran on, Tom, and he said it a million times since between now and 2015, is make America great again. Well, one of the things that made America great was that we were a wealthy enough country that we could send money and people to these places in the world that needed help. That's one of the things that made us great.
Yeah, but Carl, I mean, that's like Margaret Brennan's question to J.D. Vance the other day, which was we were founded by immigrants. Like, that doesn't mean 240 years later we have to have the dumbest immigration. So we were a wealthy country once, and we could spread some money around, particularly in the aftermath of World War II. That's great. It's 80 years later, we're $100 trillion in debt, or whatever the number is, and we're not a wealthy country anymore. We're actually, we're in massive
I thought that
debt.
was a good soundbite to end this section on myself.
We don't have to have these stupid programs that just needlessly spend taxpayer money all over the globe.
Tom Bevan Taft.
Look, I want to move on to just our last topic for this part of the show, and that's this new leadership at the DNC. We had an election over the weekend. Ken Martin, who was a long-term Democratic Party insider. He led the party in Minnesota. He was elected Saturday, take over as Democratic National Committee chair. So, Carl, what does Ken Martin have to do to make the DNC great again?
Well, he doesn't seem like the person that the moment calls for, because he's not a theorist, and he's not doing any of the questioning of why the Democrats lost working class people. He seems like a tactician. What he said publicly is that he seems to indicate that the Democrats need to run even tougher campaigns. Whenever Democrats lose, they say, well, we should be as mean as the Republicans. But I wonder, did he see any of these ads that the Republican Party ran? Did he notice that they called the nominee of the Republican Party Hitler for like straight months? I'm rethinking this whole Minnesota nice thing. I'm thinking, wait a minute, Amy Klobuchar, one of the when she ran for office for president in 2016, we found out that she's really mean to her staff and abusive to her staff. Tim Walz is from Minnesota. He got on the ticket because he called Trump and called Trump and JD Vance names, said they were weird and un-American. And now this guy comes forward and he's basically presenting himself as a knife fighter. I mean, maybe Minnesota mean is the right thing to think of instead of Minnesota nice. I don't know. This has thrown me off.
Well, Tom, I mean, that is an interesting position because it is generally thought of as a tactician, someone who raises money. But there is this sort of need, it seems, for the Democrats to sort of rethink the entire party from the bottom up. And Ken Martin, again, as Carl said, I mean, I'm not sure he's the man for the moment. And if you watched any of this DNC proceedings over the weekend, it didn't get the feeling that they had gotten the message.
I saw the clip of the one woman who, she had 30 seconds. She was running for, I think, DNC vice chair maybe, and she had 30 seconds for an opening remark, and she just sang a song. And then there was another woman who was an African-American woman, was like, apparently people were chatting while she was trying to give her speech, and she like chastised the whole crowd and basically, with this racial appeal saying, there's a black woman speaking, you need to be listening to me. They had this clip where they were trying to vote on these nominees, and they had all these gender bi rules and had to be balanced, and Jamie Harrison got confused and had to call someone else up to explain it to people. I mean, it seemed a little crazy. And there were a lot of stories and we read a couple of them on the front page of Real Clear Politics this morning, but a lot of stories about what happened over the weekend and whether Democrats learned the lesson, didn't learn the lesson. The consensus was, even from Democrats like Jonathan Chait and some other folks, the Democrats really didn't, David Hogg, the
Right.
Parkland survivor, who's an anti-gun activist and who's pretty far to the left. I mean, someone had clipped some of the stuff from his X feed, and he's saying, defund the police and defund all of this. I mean, he's pretty radical guy, and he is now the vice chair. So I'm not sure that the Democrats did themselves any favor in terms of, addressing what happened in November, moving forward, trying to get back to sort of the middle and reaching those working class voters, given what happened this weekend and the folks that they ended up electing.
Yeah, Carl, David Hogg is an interesting choice as vice chair. He's probably the most high profile member of the DNC leadership. I mean, more people have probably heard of him than Martin. And he has called for defunding ICE. He's quite vocal. He's quite to the left. And again, what do you make of the Hogg choice?
Well, he's a young man, and he's famous in a sense for being famous. That Parkland shooting, the moral of the story to the Democrats was that the NRA was responsible, and that really wasn't the right moral to get from that shooting. In my opinion, I'm not opposed to gun control, but the FBI had been warned about this specific shooter at least twice. The local cops had been to the house numerous times. They hadn't arrested him because of a program you have there, it's aimed at helping. I don't know who it's aimed at helping, minorities, I guess. And so the Broward County sheriffs and then the people on the scene, the cops didn't help. They sort of cowered in the buildings. There was so much wrong there, but the Democrats immediately went to gun control, and David Hogg was the spokesman for that. And I don't want to criticize him. He seems like a nice young man to me, but it does seem to me that the Democrats don't have a good feel anymore for what's going on among working class Americans in this country. And this is more evidence of that.
Yeah. All right. Well, guys, we're going to have to take a break. You're listening to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM. I'm Andrew Walworth. I'm here with Tom and Carl, but don't go away. We'll be back with more after this.
Welcome back to Real Clear Politics on SiriusXM. I'm Tom Bevan, co-founder and president of RCP, joined now by William Forstchen. He is a professor of history at Montreat College and a New York Times bestselling author of 1 Second After. He is an expert on EMP devices and the threat that they pose. Dr. Forstchen, thanks for joining me today. Appreciate your time.
It's a pleasure to be with you.
So this is a subject that has fascinated me for a long time. I think I read a op-ed by Newt Gingrich. Maybe it might have been 20 years ago or something, where he talked about the threat of EMP. So first of all, just give our listeners and viewers a sense. What are we talking about when we talk about an EMP attack?
Okay, quick primer. EMP, electromagnetic pulse weapon. It's created by lofting a small nuclear warhead about 200 miles above the Earth's atmosphere. Detonate the warhead about 4 or 5 times the size of a Hiroshima bomb. The instant it blows, it sets up an electrostatic discharge called the Compton effect. Cascades down to the Earth's surface, and all those millions of miles of wire that we have now become antenna. The electrostatic discharge feeds into them, feeds into our power grid, shorts the system out. According to 2 congressional studies, we get hit by an EMP, 80 to 90% of the population will die within a year because the electrical grid of the United States is gone.
So obviously that's pretty scary stuff.
Yes, it is.
I mean, how realistic is this threat? Like I said, it's been around. The idea of an EMP has been around for a long time. I think it was, in one sense, it was popularized in the movie Ocean's 11. A lot of people
Which
have
got
seen
it all wrong.
which got it all wrong. I understand that, but still. But so how realistic is this threat? Like, where would you put it on a scale of 1 to 100 in terms of it being a legitimate immediate threat, or something that is sort of not as immediate?
Well, you're talking to a guy whose life for the last 15 years has been writing books about EMP, so I put it at 100. I think the normal person might put it at a 20 or a 40. But regardless of that, you get hit by this system. You're in Chicago, correct?
I am.
Yeah. Okay, where do you get your water from? Your water supply is gone instantly because the pumping stations are gone. The food is gone. Command and control is down. Pharmacies are closed. Gas stations are closed. All these things compound together. So I take it as a very real threat. And when I first got into this, I was a bit of a skeptic until I read the congressional reports, and I was like, oh my God, this thing is real.
Are there documented uses of EMPs in the past? And
Yes.
if so, what okay, so what have they been?
Okay, there were 2. In 1962, we lofted a nuclear warhead into space to see what would happen when it went bang. Well, it was 500 miles south of Hawaii when it blew. It blew out part of the Honolulu electrical grid. A couple months later, the Soviets figured, well, we got to try it. It's called Soviet Test 184. They lofted one up there. It went off over Kazakhstan. It blew out a power station 500 miles away. So after that, interesting is that we had the test ban treaty only months after that. So we have not detonated a nuke in space since, but everything points that this is a very real threat. And North Korea is the big player with this.
And why do you worry most? I saw a previous interview you did where you said North Korea is your biggest worry. Why are they, in your mind, the biggest threat for this type of attack?
When you have a leader who actually executes people by strapping them down in the middle of the field and firing mortars at them, that's a little weird to start with. He's a psychotic ruler. If one day he woke up and say he's diagnosed as terminal, and he figures, I'll take America with me. He already has the launch capability. He also has the nuke capability. That's why I call it number 1. Iran could be a threat if they continue forward with their nuclear program. There's also some nukes that might be missing from the old Soviet days that could go into the hands of a player like ISIS. Give them a primitive launch system, take it off the American coast, it's gone, and we're gone.
So you mentioned the scenario that you outlined is this massive bomb that's detonated, 200 miles above the.
Actually, a relatively small bomb, yeah, okay, small, but a Hiroshima-sized weapon, one average military use weapons today are anywhere between a quarter of a megaton up to 5 megatons. We're talking about 50 kiloton for something like this.
I guess my question is, would it be possible to do something smaller I saw someone had talked about one of the potential attacks being, you could even set off a small nuclear device in the middle of a city, shoot it up, I don't know, 500 feet, 1,000 feet, whatever. If you wanted to, for example, just take out Wall Street, is that a legitimate, realistic option here as well?
Not really. Remember, this is a line of sight event. So when you're in space, you got a line of sight of 1,000 or more miles. Uh, Look at it this way, bang for the buck. The bad guys want to take us down. They fire off a nuke over the Empire State Building. Wall Street would survive. A couple 100,000 people would die. Now, let's take the same weapon, put it into space, and detonate it, and suddenly you have a catastrophic event for the entire East Coast of the United States. So it's bang for the buck.
We're speaking with Dr. William Forstchen. He is an expert on EMPs and a professor of history at Montreat College. Professor, so we've talked about how awful this would be.
Mhm.
So what can we do to protect ourselves against it? I mean, if you're, and I know you, in your bio, you say you were advising and you've advised, governments and politicians about this. I mean, if you could wave a magic wand, what would you have us do immediately to protect
gosh.
ourselves?
There are several things we have to do. One is to have a foreign policy that conveys very clearly to North Korea, Iran, and others. You even think of something like this, don't do it, and really mean it. Second, a anti-missile system. Yeah, we go back to the old Star Wars day, but that was 40 years ago. We have the technology now to establish anti-missile capability along the West Coast, the Gulf of Mexico, and the Eastern United States. Third thing, be prepared. Our electrical grid, according to DOE, is 30 to 40 years. We're pumping electricity 30 to 40-year-old systems. Upgrade to a modern system that is more heavily grounded and circuit breaking system that could disrupt this. And then finally, on a very personal level, we should all be prepared. Now, I'm in Asheville, North Carolina. I witnessed a catastrophic event that's still affecting us 4 months later. If every person here had a month's worth of supplies on hand at the time it happened, it would make a tremendous difference there or in the event of an EMP.
Are there other things that can be done to protect electronic or electrical devices from EMPs? Like, I'd read something about, there are shields and protections that you can put around things. How realistic are those?
Well, everybody has a Faraday cage, which is just basically a wired cage. Everybody has one in their house already. It's called, a microwave. You Faraday cage key components, be it for defense on a larger scale or even locally. If you want a Faraday cage, a cell phone, and some other systems, you put them in the microwave, it will resist, an EMP. Just don't push the start button because then you're going to lose it. Okay. So that's one thing right there, Faraday caging systems. But again, better circuit breaking systems as well.
All right. Professor William Forstchen, we're going to have to leave it there for today, but thank you for joining me. I appreciate it. And hopefully we never have to talk about this in a realistic sense, but it is a threat that we need to deal with. So thank you for your time. We appreciate it.
God bless you. Thanks. And have a great day yourself. Bye
You
now.
too. All right. And that's going to do it for us on Real Clear Politics on SiriusXM. I'm Tom Bevan, co-founder and president of RCP, on behalf of Andy and Carl. Thanks for joining us tonight, and we'll see you back here tomorrow night.